Welcome, everyone. Hi, everybody. My name is Dan Tiernan. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Campbell and one of the 5 owners of the company. I'm also a licensed CAM, and I work closely with many of our association clients and some of the more complex issues they may be facing. For those of you that might not be familiar with Campbell, we've been in business since 1953, and we manage over 400 homeowner associations and condo associations between Dade County up to the Treasure Coast. And we are proud to be South Florida's highest rated property management company. So just a quick reminder, this webinar is for information purposes only, and it's not legal advice. If you require legal advice specific to your community, you should reach out to your attorney. So with that, this talk today is about how to be efficient and effective in one very specific area, board meetings. Well, why board meetings? Well, because board meetings are a public display of your board's performance. If your meetings appear dysfunctional, owners lose confidence. If your meetings are run well, it instills confidence in the owners. So we had a lot of people asking questions in advance of this meeting, and most of those questions fell into the following 6 categories I have listed up here. I can't promise you we'll fully answer all the questions you ask, but we'll try and at least direct you to where you can find the answers in detail on our blog, Florida Association News, and I'll tell you more about that later. So let's take a look at some of the questions you all had about running effective board meetings so we can get a feel for what people's concerns were. So in the general question, here are some of the questions that were asked, and we'll cover most all of this. How long should meetings last? Are closed board meetings allowed? How do we use Robert's rules, etc.? I'm not going to go through all these, but we'll be sending you the presentation afterwards as well as a video link. There were also 6 general questions about the agenda, and we're going to absolutely cover that in detail because having a proper and effective agenda is one of the most key things you can do to have an effective board meeting. Number 3, it sounded like a lot of attendees today had issues with boards that were dysfunctional as demonstrated by their meetings. It also looks that there are a lot of dysfunctional boards based on the comments in the chat that we've got here, and we're definitely going to be covering this. And for those of you that didn't have dysfunctional boards, many of you have disruptive owners, so we'll be suggesting some tips on how to prevent some of these issues as well. And it also sounded like many of your boards, or you've seen it happen frequently, where boards struggle to stay on the agenda. There were a lot of concerns about how to handle these issues that were not on the agenda as well, how you're supposed to handle that. And we'll definitely cover that. Finally, there were a lot of questions about how to set up and run meetings online with Zoom or other tools. I'm going to definitely point you to some very specific content on this area, some blog posts on Florida Association News. Again, I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a couple minutes because we could spend an hour alone on this topic, but it's absolutely critical. It's something that no one asked 2 years ago, but now it's something that everyone needs to understand and be able to deal with effectively. So it sounds like from the questions we received in advance and from the comments in the chat that not everyone's meetings are being run as well as they could be. So let's make sure we really understand the problem. You know, at the start of the webinar, we asked you the following question. Think about the worst meeting you've ever experienced, board meeting you've experienced. What was it like? And just looking through all of these comments, I think we can summarize it into 3 different areas for the worst board meetings. Number 1, they last too long. Number 2, nothing gets accomplished. And number 3, everybody leaves unhappy. I think I might have to add a 4th one, is that there's a lot of anger and violence. It looks like there's a lot of that. So what we're going to do today is shoot for the opposite of what you guys described. So, you know, we believe that a good board meeting is, number 1, short. It accomplishes, number 2, it accomplishes a lot. And number 3, everyone leaves happy and impressed. That last is kind of a stretch. I'm not sure we can get there. Maybe we should say everyone leaves satisfied. So we opened a poll at the beginning of the webinar and asked you all to tell us how long does a typical board meeting take at your community. So Ashley, do you have the results of that?
I do. I'm going to share it right now. Can everybody see it?
All right, great. So it looks like 30% of you, we had 297 people answer the poll. We have over 300, we have 338 people on here now, but we had 297 answer the poll. 30% of you said an hour or less. 58% of you said 1 to 2 hours, and 12% of you said 2 hours or more. So in my experience, a regular board meeting should not take longer than 1 hour if you follow all these steps we're going to talk through in this session today. So if it's taking longer than that for you now, then hopefully you'll be able to learn some things to get it back on track. So our goal today is to make sure you are as effective and efficient as possible in running your board meetings. And we're going to share with you the 9 steps necessary to have a great board meeting. That is, number 1, it gets completed in an hour or less. Number 2, a lot gets accomplished. And number 3, like I said before, everyone leaves happy or maybe at least satisfied. Also, it's important to understand, well, how did I come up with all these steps? Honestly, I'll tell you the truth, I cheated. I asked our managers, all of them. So Campbell has over 150 licensed CAMs with an average experience of over 10 years. So we came up with this list a few years ago at a managers meeting that we had. And the ideas we'll discuss today are based on a blog post from Florida Association News, or FAN, and it's entitled 9 Steps to an Effective Board Meeting. So if you ever want to refer back to what we talked about today, you can always find it on FAN. And after this meeting, we're going to send everyone a link to the detailed version of this presentation, and you can review it as well as looking at the blog post. So this is a picture of what Florida Association News blog looks like. You know, the manager's wisdom are all articles on our blog that were created with the combined input of our managers. And you can read the blog, and you will be subscribed to it based on your attendance today. And you can always go find it too at www.readfan.org. Again, all this information is going to come to you afterwards as well. But I wanted to make sure you understood that this Florida Association News is a great educational resource and something you can refer back to for almost any topic that you can imagine. Okay, so number 1, let's get started here. The first key point, like Boy Scouts as well, is just be well prepared. So have you ever shown up at a board meeting where board members are hearing about topics for the first time, or maybe they're asking for more information and looking generally confused? This is not a good look. So the first 2 things you need to make sure you get right are the agenda and a good board package. So first, on the agenda, you should only be addressing issues you are prepared to act upon. If this is not the case, the issue shouldn't be on the agenda. The second point here is detailed board packages. And you want to make sure that the board packages provide the relevant detail for the agenda items. They need to be sent out at least a few business days before the meeting. That might include things like, you know, bids, reports from engineers or architects, you know, bid comparison sheets, those kinds of things. So in addition to that, we also had a few questions that were asked before the meeting that I think we should just address here in the preparation topic. When can the board hold closed meetings that are not open to owners? That was one of the questions people asked. And that's a pretty simple answer. It's for personnel or legal matters only. And you can talk to your attorney about that in more detail. And then there's also another topic that came up regarding workshops. So this is something that not everyone's familiar with, but a lot of associations like to have these informal meetings before the board meetings to set the agenda and review topics in advance. And these are commonly called workshops. And these kinds of meetings have become kind of a tradition at a lot of 55+ communities. And, you know, with that in mind, we had a few questions related to the topic. And one of them was, is a condo board allowed to conduct business in a workshop as long as any actions are ratified at the next open board meeting? And the answer to that's pretty simple, is that workshops that have a quorum of board members should be posted as a board meeting, even if no actions are taken. So a lot of people get confused about that, and there's really not any language or law about workshops per se, because they're just something someone invented a long time ago and they've kind of become a tradition, but you really need to treat them like regular board meetings and notice them and handle minutes accordingly if you're going to have a quorum of the board there. So just wanted to make sure we cleared that up, because this comes up a lot when we do these in person. On to number 2, make sure that you have the right setup and equipment for the board meeting. One of the things I often ask people is, what is the ideal setup for board seating? Most people end up putting a straight table across the front looking out at the owners. In reality, the best setup is more of a U, V, or semicircle shape so that board members can all make eye contact. I think it's important to remember that this is a board meeting. It's not a members meeting. So the purpose of the meeting is for the board members to be able to communicate with each other, discuss issues, and make decisions. So it really should be set up in such a way that they can see and talk to each other and not all just be staring out looking at the owners. So it's also important to think about how to handle some other real common scenarios, like, do you have snowboard board members? And if that's the case, then if you're not doing Zoom meetings already, you definitely should have a teleconferencing so that people can, hear everything effectively. So, at a minimum, have a proper speakerphone. I mean, I've seen too many situations where people will set their mobile phone, turn it on speaker mode and set it down, and that's a very ineffective solution. You can get really inexpensive speaker phones that are Bluetooth that cost under $100 now. And then one other really important tool, great tool that not enough people have, is this right here. A gavel is much more effective than screaming. It's universally respected. You don't want to use it all the time, but it's a great way to start and close the meeting, and to use it when things get out of hand. Like, it sounds like a lot of times things have gotten out of hand at some of your meetings based on the chat comment I saw there. And then finally, if you've got a big crowd, 50 plus people, it may make sense to have a PA, or public address or speaker system. And there's some really low cost, simple ways to do this. And then finally, if you're going to have a lot of complex material to present, it may make sense to have a projector as well, so that you can put maybe a PowerPoint up to be able to show information and share it with the rest of the owner group. I mentioned the idea of a inexpensive speaker system. And here's an example from Florida Association News of the kind of things that we'll share. Honestly, what happened is one of my teenage sons had a karaoke machine, which it turns out works really well if you need a microphone and a speaker. And this system on here actually costs $115. So you can look this up at Florida Association News. It's not the most sophisticated thing, but it actually worked incredibly well for audiences up to 100 people, and much simpler to use and set up than getting a professional audio person in to put a full-blown system in place. So it's also, I think, important to address the virtual meeting challenges that are going on now. Less than 2 years ago, I'd say less than 5% of the associations we worked with used virtual or Zoom meetings. Now I would say that 95% of the associations we work with either use or have used virtual or Zoom meetings. So I absolutely do not think they're going away. They're just too convenient, and they're not difficult to set up. So they can be a bit tricky though, working through, and I'm sure many of you are starting to see this. Having an in-person meeting is not too challenging. Having a virtual meeting is not too challenging. But when you do a hybrid meeting where you're trying to do both, where you've got a physical meeting in place, where there's a primary location and remote access is allowed, then it gets a little bit trickier, because you've got to deal with the audio, and then the video element, and making sure you're showing everyone reasonably what everyone else is seeing at the physical board meeting. That can be a bit more complicated. So again, we don't have time to go through all these in detail today, but I can point you to, guess where again, Florida Association News. And these are just 4 of the blog posts that are on there that cover how to get this done. I mean, ideally, you would work with your management company. We actually have a few experts here that have worked with all these different systems and know how to set up the virtual Zoom and hybrid meetings and so on. But it's not terribly complicated, and these blog posts will be very useful if this is an area you need to get more detail on. Okay, number 3 is to make sure that you establish time limits. So this is, and what I mean there is that as you're building out the agenda, say you've got 7 areas you want to talk about that day, you might need to think through, can you get through each of those 7 areas in 5 minutes or less? And if you can't, maybe you should be asking yourself, well, why are we putting on this on here if it's going to take more than 5 minutes to discuss it? It should be more clear than that. And if you're concerned about not being able to come to a clear conclusion during the meeting, then maybe, again, you shouldn't have that item on there. So I think setting it out with an idea of how much time you're going to need to spend on each topic is incredibly important. And then there's also one real simple thing you can do to keep things moving along. If a discussion's going on too long, there's 3 magic words. That's call the question, which means basically making a motion to vote on the topic that's being discussed. Because I think a lot of people talked about, people just repeating the same things over and over again and not getting to the vote. So this is something that can absolutely move things along. So managing your time effectively and making sure you're fully prepared are incredibly important items. Number 4 is declaring the ground rules. So some people that are not familiar with community board meetings might think it's more like a town hall. And as you all understand, they're not. Board meetings are for the board members to make decisions and conduct business. So the meeting chair should remind everyone of the purpose of the meeting and how and when attendees can participate in advance. And the chair should use a gavel, as we talked about earlier, instead of raising their voice to maintain order. So the primary right of owners is to attend, observe, and listen, not really to give input. They do have a right to ask questions, but in general, their primary role there is to attend, observe, and listen. So rules need to be communicated in advance of the meeting so people don't feel like the rule is only for them. So some associations publish rules for the meeting, at the meeting, and hand them out or put them on the front or back of the agenda. And here's an example of a policy regarding how board meetings will function. I'm not going to read through this in detail, but it's just something that you can give to everyone in advance to remind everyone that there's an agenda. The meeting is for the board members. At the conclusion of the meeting, the members may speak for non-agenda items for up to 1 minute, and that if people get out of hand, that they'll be asked to leave the meeting and so on. So just having a clear policy like this, and this is just an example of one that you'll get post this webinar, and you could use this or some derivative of it to share with your owners in advance, because you never know when someone new might come in that just doesn't understand how this stuff works. Number 5, and this is probably the most important one, is an area, and it's an area a lot of associations struggle with, and that's staying on the agenda. Stay on topic, stay on time. Board meetings are not designated for brainstorming. If someone wants to bring up something new, you can allow them to make a motion to add it to the next meeting, but you really shouldn't be talking, you can't talk about it if it's not on the agenda. So in condos, it's literally not legal for you to talk about non-agenda items in the board meeting. And HOAs have a little bit more leeway, but it's not a best practice at all. It's a very bad practice. So, and the reason it's not legal is that owners have a right to listen to whatever topics or issues may be being addressed. And if it's not on the agenda, they won't know that they maybe should have been there. So if you're having trouble at the same time coming up with a way of setting your agenda, we've got to policy for that as well. Again, I'm not going to read through it in detail, but the basic idea is that the president with the manager sets the agenda, shares it with the rest of the board, looks for feedback. The president doesn't have to take any of the feedback, but they can add to or adjust as they want. And then the board members can make motions to add things on that maybe they didn't get added on in the next board meeting. So this is a real simple method or policy in case you're ever having issues with this. Most boards don't, but if you do, this is a real simple set of guidelines to how to make sure you can establish an effective agenda. Number 6, boards may have the ability to limit members' rights to speak in a lot of ways, but we recommend that you not set up an approach where they feel like they don't have a voice. So members should be required to sign up to speak as they enter the meeting, and their time should be limited, typically like 3 minutes per topic, and it's only for items on the agenda. And if a key issue's, if there's a key issue that's drawn a lot of members that is a real hot topic, put that on the agenda early so that people can come early and potentially leave after that's done. And make sure that you allow members to speak on the topic before it's voted on. So obviously you can let the board completely discuss the topic, but before you call for the vote, do give owners a chance to ask questions and get their input. I mean, technically, legally, you could wait to the end, but that's just really a bad practice and disrespectful, honestly, of the owners. So, and if you need a policy that's clear for this as well, we've got those, and I can send that out as well. Then number 7. So number 7 is Robert's rules. So use Robert's rules with reason. Robert's rules is a guide, but don't get caught up in the details. It's not the law. Condo and HOA boards are small boards, and Robert's rules is really for large parliamentary bodies. And if you're a Robert's rules ninja, I wouldn't try to use it to its fullest extent because it's not fair, because other people won't understand it. You really just need to keep it simple. And not everything is necessarily relevant, and some of what you might read is contrary to your docs. So don't let the protocol distract you from the content. If necessary, and if it's challenge for you as a board president, you can assign someone to be the parliamentarian, so they can make sure to remember to ask for a motion, to get a second, to make sure they record the votes and so on. But again, make sure you use it as a baseline, but don't get caught up in the details. Number 8 is it's always a good idea to try to win friends and influence people, especially when they're your neighbors and shareholders. This is from Dale Carnegie, and it still makes a lot of sense. So board members, I think most of you understand that owners may criticize, accuse, defame, slander you. And if you think this might happen in advance, a lot of times when it might happen, just have a prepared response. For example, I don't agree with what you said. I don't believe it's true. I consider what you said to be slanderous and don't appreciate it. However, we need to move on. So don't inflame the situation. Name calling, accusations, you need to be the one that kind of calms it down. And this is used to be tapped on, not to be thrown. That's another important point. So just try not to inflame things. That's the most important point there. And number 9 is making sure you understand the minutes are not supposed to be transcripts. So a lot of boards are getting elected with new members that feel like they need to be transparent. And one of the ways they want to be transparent is putting everything that happens and occurs and gets discussed into the meeting minutes. And that's not a good idea. It creates a lot of liability for your board, and something you should definitely make sure you don't get in the habit of doing. And if you ever hear someone said, I want the minutes to reflect, et cetera, don't do that. That doesn't serve the board. It only serves the individual. The key things that need to be in here are the quorum, the motions, votes, key decisions, and action items, and then the ending of the meeting. So it needs to be kept very simple. And someone also asked the question, they said, should owners' questions be included in the minutes? And that's an easy answer, and it's absolutely not. You should not be recording owners' questions in the minutes. So those are the 9 steps. Hopefully this has been effective for you and helpful. And I also want to make sure that you remember that this Florida Association News is a wealth of information that can help you. You can find it, you can subscribe to it at getfan.org, read it at readfan.org, and we'll make sure we subscribe you to that at the end of this session. And also, I think one other thing I'll have Ashley send to all of you is our board member primer. This is a 13, 15-page document that helps you understand your role and responsibility as a board member, and how to educate yourself, and a lot of information on some of the key topics that new board members often run into. And with that, I think we are done. I'm going to look through, and hopefully you all can, Ashley's put up another survey here. Hopefully we'll appreciate if you can answer these questions for us. And I'm going to look through the Q&A and see if there's anything in here. Someone asked a question, do articles of incorporation supersede the bylaws of the association? The answer to that is yes. So an attorney a long time ago reminded me, just have to remember DAB, D-A-B, Declaration, Articles, Bylaws. That's the sequence. So, and then above that is Florida law, and above that is federal law. And then below that is rules. So just remember, though, DAB is the most simple thing. Declaration, Articles, Bylaws, Declaration being the highest level. Someone asked about Robert's Rules of Order. We went through that already. Do you have to take minutes at a workshop? Yep, you have to treat it like any other board meeting if there's a quorum. If an item's not on the agenda, is it possible to discuss the item on old or new business of the meeting? I would tell you, in an HOA, you can kind of get away with it. In a condo, no. And you shouldn't try to get away with it in an HOA, because you shouldn't be talking about things that you didn't tell owners you're going to be talking about. So it's a really simple concept. If you just remember that, you shouldn't be doing that. And you can have a good and welfare or kind of thing at the end where you are letting people ask questions, but you really can't be getting into a debate, or you can treat it more as like an opportunity to hear what people might be concerned about that maybe they should consider for future board meetings. See if there's anything else. Recording meetings, you really shouldn't be recording. If you're recording meetings, then you really, after the meeting, you should be deleting them after you've done your minutes. It does not benefit the association to retain the minutes, and you can talk to your attorney about that. He'll explain it in a much more elegant way than I would ever do. Let's see what else. People ask questions. Can I have a copy of your PowerPoint? Yes, we'll give you that. Someone wants a copy of the Surfside report. Just email marketing at Campbell. We'll get you that. Or you can go on YouTube and find it, or on Florida Association News. And I think that about covers it, because it's 12:30 and I don't want to keep you longer than I promised. So thank you again. We had over 350 people show up today for this. Hopefully you've learned a few things. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to respond to the email that we send out. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you so much. And I think we'll leave it open for a few more minutes for people that are trying to finish the survey.